Welcome back to another episode of Mixed Views
Yeah.
with your favorite mixed couple, Humna and Tyler. Today we are going to be talking about the two-part docuseries that covers two grown adult men now who accuse Michael Jackson of child molestation when they were kids and into their teens.
The movie or the docuseries is called Leaving Neverland.
Neverland.
I don't know why I said that weird. You can find it on Hulu.
It's produced by HBO, so yeah, you can find it on Hulu. You can watch it with a free trial, which is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we're gonna be talking about today, part one. The other day, Humna and I sat down and started to watch the first part of Leaving Neverland, which we mentioned was a two-part series that basically is long-form interview with two men who are now into their adult lives. They're married. I'm not sure if either of them have kids. I don't think either of them do. But they're both pretty successful in what they've gone on to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they sit down and they start to talk about what really happened in their words.
Childhood, basically.
In their childhood, in their words, in their relationships, their close relationships with the singer and entertainer Michael Jackson. I think Michael Jackson died in 2009, so it's been almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two guys, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, both claim that Michael Jackson fielded close relationships with them as young kids, and this went on through their early teenage years. Wade Robson is an Australian native who grew up idolizing Michael Jackson. He was first introduced to him through his mom by being shown a Thriller video, and after that he was basically encompassed by this singer. And since then, he basically watched and idolized and tried to mimic his every dance move and kind of became fascinated with dancing.
I mean, he did grow up to be the choreographer for Britney Spears and NSYNC.
Right, and so when he was 5 years old, he was entered into a contest, a dancing contest, which actually he technically wasn't even qualified to be in because you had to be 7 or 8 or older. But they told him he could make a guest appearance, and he did so well, kind of copying Michael Jackson's bad dances and Thriller dances, that they declared him the winner. And the first prize got to meet Michael Jackson because Michael Jackson was in town at the time on one of his tours. And he was able to meet Michael Jackson, and that's kind of where his relationship with Robson started when he was 5 or 7. I think it was 5 years old.
He first met him when he was 5, but later on he doesn't really get to Michael until he's 7.
Yeah, because he eventually became part of a dance group that him and his mom and his sister ended up moving to the United States, Los Angeles, as a part of this dance group. And basically Michael Jackson said, if you're ever in the area, California, get in touch with me. And that's exactly what happened, and that's where this close relationship with Wade Robson started. Now, James Safechuck lived in California at the time, and he
was really into more of the acting, I guess.
Yeah,
he was starting in small commercials and stuff like that.
His mom kind of got him into a talent agency, which really liked his physical appearance, and his first interaction with Michael Jackson was in a Pepsi commercial, where Safechuck says his first time ever seeing Jackson was in the filming of that Pepsi commercial. The reaction that is shown, they wanted to get like a really authentic reaction. And so when Michael Jackson enters the room of this Pepsi commercial, which we can find and link down below, the reaction that you see is the actual reaction of the boy first seeing Michael Jackson. And Jackson, of course, took a liking to the boy and started their relationship there. I saw some similarities in the families.
Yeah, they both were they attached Michael to their own family, kind of just adopted him because of the way he always seemed to them, like this lonely child who had nobody. Right,
and one of the things that James Safechuck's mom, whose name I forget, she basically said this relationship grew so strong, not just with James, but with her family, that she connected with him as if he was another son. When your mom says, your best friend is basically an extension of the family. That's how she felt with Michael Jackson, because he would not only call James, but he would call her, and they would just talk on the phone. She really felt like he was another part of the family.
Yeah, in the beginning of the docuseries, you really see that, Michael builds these strong connections with the families themselves as he starts to develop his quote-unquote love for the boys.
And it doesn't take him long to do so. It really, I'm going to kind of dive into something deep, but someone who's trying to manipulate a family and gain their trust so they can do some manipulative things.
Got to go to the mom first.
Well, not just that, but it takes time. It takes a long time. You got to but he's Michael Jackson.
Everybody was in awe.
Everybody, he's a singer. He's an entertainer. He makes people happy. So, you can kind of feel, if he's trying to be this genuine and take out this much time for this family, he must be a really good person. And so the same dialect with Wade Robson's family. They just kind of felt like he was this genuine human being that was just kind of an extension of their family. They were always treated so well. He always called. He always wanted to talk to Wade, and they said Jackson would tell them, I'm just basically a 9-year-old boy in an adult man's body.
Right. I think both of the moms basically summed it up as, they just thought of it as, being that Michael is such a huge pop figure, he's never had a childhood or anything like that, so they just assumed, he wants real authentic people around him. He wants that atmosphere of a real family, getting to hang out with the kids, talking to your mom about whatever issues you got going on. I think that's what both of the moms were kind of saying, that, that's how he got involved in their families.
Right. And, eventually both the boys ended up kind of following him on tours. And James Safechuck and his mom went, and toured with Jackson. And when they would stay at hotels, at first Jackson wanted Safechuck to stay in his own room, and it wasn't really working out with the mom at the time. But eventually that's how it ended up. Safechuck would stay in Jackson's room, and his mom would have another room on the same level. And then over time, it just became where the rooms would become farther and farther away from each other.
Yeah, once the boys and Jackson started to actually do sexual things together, that's when the rooms started to get very further apart.
Right. And so the sexual stuff kind of started with an introduction to masturbation, and then, you know, it would turn into oral sex, showering, kissing, things of that nature. I don't really know how to talk about it. I mean, that's just saying what they did is kind of enough, until you watch it.
Right, and I mean, I think both boys said that anal penetration was tried at least once, but it never worked out for either of them, so that was it.
Right, and this Jackson told the boys, like, this is the way that we show our love. You know, this is how it should be. God brought us together, and this is how we show our love.
Right, and he would, as the boys would go on tours with Michael, you know, he started to basically coach the boys into separating them emotionally from the rest of the family. You know, the boys were no longer having any kind of bond with their fathers. You know, their mothers were there because they were there to watch them and all that, but even their mothers, they didn't have that strong bond as they would have had they not met Michael.
Right, and both the boys kind of say, once they were introduced to Neverland, which is Michael Jackson's huge mansion, you know, the mothers would say, like, I would spend the day looking for them because it's so big, and they would just be off doing their own thing. But when I did find them, you know, the boy...
It was nothing suspicious looking, you know. The mothers always must have caught them when they were just playing games and not actually doing anything.
Well, they tell you, and the boys tell you... Well, I shouldn't say the boys, because they're not boys.
Now,
the guys tell you, like, you know, they would allegedly rehearse drills and having to get dressed as fast as you can without making noise if somebody was coming. And things of that nature. So, I mean, Jackson really, if this is true,
he really coached those boys
to a T. He coached the boys like it sounded like any other pedophile or child abuser would sound. You know, you can't tell anybody about our relationship. If you do, they'll pull us apart. We'll go to jail for the rest of our lives.
They just want to ruin us.
You know, this is, yeah, things like that. And
especially watching SVU, I think, like, the two of us could see, like, instantly that's, like, common things that most pedophiles say to keep the kids under control.
Right. They use things such as the family and their own lives to scare them into staying quiet. And not only that, the boys were so young that, you know, they acknowledged that they didn't really understand at first that it was wrong. You know, they didn't think anything of it.
Michael was technically their first sexual experience.
Right. And they were so young, 7, 8 years old, that they didn't, 7, 8, 9 years old, that
they didn't know to question it.
Right. It was just, it was their first sexual experience, like you said, and it was introduction to a sexual experience, which they didn't really know about. They didn't have the information.
But even the way, like, Michael introduced it, it was so, like, slow moving. You know, it started out with he'll masturbate the boys, and then he'll masturbate in front of the boys, and then kissing, oral sex, and then the actual anal penetration. So even the way he moved along with the boys was just so slow, and being that they never experienced any of this because they're still kids, there really was no reason for them to question anything.
Right.
They're like, oh, they probably were thinking in terms of, like, someone's treating me, you know, like an adult, I guess.
Yeah. And eventually, later on, as the years went by, the connection kind of moved apart, and Jackson would find other boys.
Yeah, I think one of the moms said she noticed a pattern that every year there was a new boy that became Michael's, quote, best friend.
Right, you had the first boy that ever came out. His name was Jordy. I don't remember his last name. He was the first boy that ever accused Jackson of any misconduct.
But he was the fourth boy to have been with Michael.
Right.
Because I think James was first, and then it was Wade, and then it was the Home Alone kid, and then it was Jordy.
Yeah, so, and there was also, I assume it was a Make-A-Wish kid, because they didn't name Make-A-Wish by name, but they said an organization that grants wishes for ill-stricken kids. So I can only assume it's Make-A-Wish.
I mean, that's the only foundation that we know that does that.
And that boy also alleged Michael Jackson with misconduct. And, you know, in my opinion, if I see a man have, you know, one different boy touring with him every single year, I'm not going to think anything of it, because maybe he's just got this very strong connection with helping kids, you know, giving kids this huge opportunity to kind of live the way Michael Jackson lived and have this entertainment life and kind of just see a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity kind of lifestyle in being with Jackson. Now, would I question whether, like, okay, well, why are there no female? Because we know there were a lot of little girls that enjoyed his music and his entertainment.
Right, like was it Wade's sister?
Yeah.
Wade's sister, you know, in the very beginning when Wade would go on tour, you know, the sister came along, the mother came along, but nothing ever happened with the sister.
No,
she was always kept in a separate room with the mother.
Right. I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I love you too. Yeah, no, I mean, if you think about it, when...
Oh, I got my train of thought back. But when those allegations of Michael is sleeping in the same bed with these boys, multiple, each boy, you know, that's when I would start to question it. And I don't think anybody ever did. I don't think, until those allegations came out, I don't think anybody ever questioned it.
I mean, you heard one of the moms say, you know, she'd find them after a while and they were just playing games, and, you know, she would think, you know, they've been playing games so much that they just fall asleep together.
Right, and the mothers of the two boys would defend him on that. Jackson would call, when the first allegations of sexual abuse came out, he would call these boys, you know, and this was at the time when he kind of drifted away from the two boys, Robson and Safechuck. And as soon as these allegations came out, he would start to call every single day.
Right. I believe with Wade, when he actually moved from Australia to LA, that's when the distance between him and Michael initially started. You know, he stopped calling him as often. You know, they didn't get luxurious gifts anymore, but because he had already started a dance career from, you know, first getting into the whole Michael Jackson phase, he was able to continue that passion.
Right.
Now, with the other kid, James, whenever James would talk with Michael always kind of discouraged him from continuing actual education and just focusing on his filmmaking. Because, you know, as James got older, he was like, yeah, I'm into the filming. So Michael would always be like, oh, you'll be the next Spielberg. You know, I'll help you with all of your projects. And so James explains, you know, throughout high school, he was, you know, a smart kid. He would get in those advanced classes. But whenever Michael would call to check up on him or, you know, want him to go hang out with him at Neverland, he'd convince the parents.
Neverland.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to say it like that. He would convince the parents to have James drop those classes. And for me, that's like a red flag. Like, you're not the parent in this situation. Yeah, I want my son, if he's really into filmmaking, to continue with, and I'm going to support him throughout whatever. But if filmmaking doesn't work out and he's good at math, let him fall back on that. And, it surprised me that the parents even agreed with Michael on this.
It doesn't really surprise me. I mean, it's a tough situation, in my opinion, when a celebrity who is successful and as wealthy as Michael Jackson is tells you that he's going to support your child's career. Do you back away from this opportunity that nobody else is seemingly given, or do you tell your kid that you're not going to trust your idol and your role model to pay for these things, and we're just going to go ahead and get you into college?
But see, I don't think it's about trust. I think that the parents in this situation should have had some sort of like reality check. Like, yeah, we may be friends with this pop celebrity, but he's a celebrity. Celebrity can do whatever they want. At the end of the day, I'm still a middle working class family, and I want my son to have an education. If Michael's going to sit here and support his filming career that he wants, go ahead. But my kid is still going to go to school and go get whatever grades he can, the best he can. And I feel like neither of the families ever really had any sort of reality check until that first and second allegations came out against him. I feel like they were just living on this high of, oh my God, Michael Jackson is talking to my kid.
In my opinion, it's just one of those things that's easier thought about, easier said than done. It'd be nice to think that you'd say, you know what, I need to separate myself and do what I would do in any other point. But when it's just the same thing. If some guy came up to me and said, here's $10 million not to go to school, you'd like to think that you'd say, well, thank you, but I still want my education.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, yeah, it definitely would have been a hard decision.
And again, it's the parents thinking about the boy, because the boy idolizes and lives his life around this guy.
Right.
And you're thinking about your kid and what's going to make your kid happy.
But even that, I wonder if, either of the parents ever stopped and talked with each other and been like, hey, do you think this is too much? Because, idolization can always turn into obsession.
I think life was just moving too fast. I think
so?
it was moving too fast for them to even stop. I just don't think there was a chance for them to slow down and stop.
I mean, because every parent wants their child to be a celebrity. I mean,
course.
Come on, if we had a kid, I think I would want him or her to be a celebrity if they could, but I hope that I would be able to have reality checks.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I don't blame the parents, because that's probably the best thing they could have done for their child to help him succeed in whatever career he wanted. But I just feel like, being that it was, the 1990s and it's not 2000, that no one really thought about things like that.
Right.
I mean, it's really crazy to think about. Like, what celebrity today could we ever imagine doing something like this? Like,
I don't know.
And even now, there is no celebrity, I feel like, as big as Michael was.
I mean, he was definitely his life was dedicated to music and to singing and dancing. I mean, he started when he was just a kid with the Jackson 5 and went on, and then he had all these hits, and he just became this huge musical talent. And if I'm going to put like my opinion on this and what I think I think Jackson is guilty of all of this. I do believe so.
I think so.
I think when he was alive, I don't think people really wanted to admit. Like, if this happened today, I think Jackson would go down real quick.
Within a heartbeat, he would have been dropped.
But at the time, I don't think people really wanted to believe it. And I don't think they really want to believe it now. But I think people let him get away, or at least pushed it under the rug, kept it quiet, didn't talk about it as much, because of who he was. And now that he's not with us anymore, I think it's easier for people, especially the victims, to come out and say something, because
he can't do anything. There's no retaliation.
I mean, there could be retaliation against this film, but I don't think there's going to be any retaliation against the guys for speaking out. I do think that he did some really, really terrible, disgusting things with the boys that have accused him in the past, that are accusing him now. And I think there's still victims that are still denying any misconduct on Jackson's part, that are, I don't want to say lying. I mean, I know it is lying, but at the same time, I just think the victims who are still denying it, they still don't really truly understand what to feel about it and how to deal with it. I don't, because it's never happened to me, and I'm not saying that they should. I mean, they should come out, but
everybody does it their own way,
and everybody needs to deal with it their own way. But I think there are still victims who are denying it to this day.
If you think about it, we've watched enough crime shows to know that a lot of times young kids who have been abused either become abuser themselves, or, you know, they just live with the guilt for the rest of their life. And I was just thinking about the Home Alone kid whose name I can't
Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah, him. I'm just gonna always refer to him as Home Alone kid. You know, he went from knowing Michael Jackson and being this, you know, kid star from the Home Alone movies, to he went downhill really fast, and now you hear nothing of him.
I mean, he's done. He was kind of like.
I mean, he's in a commercial now with Amazon, but
right.
That's the most recent.
He's picked his life back up. He had a great kind of childhood, and then, you know, into his adult life, it was really bumpy, really, really kind of dark, with drugs and just kind of not being there, and is what people saw. And, you know, since then he's picked it. I think he's picked his life back up, and he's kind of become serious, and he's just trying to live a more sober, normal life.
Right, but if you also, I don't know if you paid attention, but the guy James, he said, you know, in his 20s and all that, he was, you know, dealing with depression and anxiety, and he also, you know, eventually started to realize that he was, you know, abusing substances to deal with all of these overwhelming emotions, and the fact that he had to hold this secret because he couldn't tell anybody.
Yeah, and in the case of Wade Robson, he, I think, just filled his entire life with dancing.
Yeah, busy.
And, I mean, it got him success. He became Britney Spears' choreographer and head creative consultant at 19 years old. And he was behind, you know, NSYNC's music.
Right, but think about it. He didn't even have enough time within himself to mourn the passing of his father.
No.
Because he's like, if I stop, I'm going to crumble.
Well, because when he moved to the United States, his father didn't come with him. You know, his father was eventually...
his father eventually committed suicide.
Right. I was going to say he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and for a long time he was battling that, and he didn't really have a relationship with Wade. And then later on, you know, Wade kind of wanted to reconnect with his father, But then his brother, who was still in Australia, ended up moving to the United States.
And he said he was just coming for a visit, but...
And that's when Wade's father took his own life. And the funeral happened, and Wade said he just kind of had to get back and start living life again because, you know, he had to move on.
But that's what I'm saying. Even as you watch these men, you know, talk about their stories, I always felt like Wade was a lot more reserved in speaking. Like, it almost felt like he still had anger. And, of course, he's going to be angry. I mean, this is a terrible thing to happen to anybody, let alone a child who it happens with his, you know, role model. But just looking at, like, the demeanor that these men have, like, I feel like James has come to accept it and kind of progressively move on. But Wade just feels so reserved and, like, he wants to talk about it, but it's almost like pulling teeth the way he talks about it.
Well, I think the reason for that is when Jackson's second accuser came around, they were asked to testify on Jackson's behalf. Both the guys were asked to testify on Jackson's behalf once again, and neither of them wanted to do it. Initially. And James eventually just told Jackson, you know, just get out of my life. Mm-hmm. You know, go away. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Just go away. And that was so long ago, you know, late 90s, or not late 90s, early 2000s. I think that cutting him off just gave him the time and separation to accept what had happened to him.
Plus, if I remember correctly, I think James was older, a little bit older than Wade when
he's first started
he's
about 5 years older. Yeah. And Wade never cut him off. He told Jackson that he didn't want to testify, but he ended up eventually testifying on his behalf.
After Wade met, you know, his kids, and he felt the guilt of, you know, if I don't help him, he's going to be away from his kids.
Yeah, because this was after he had
Paris and his other two.
Right. And that's why I think if Wade had done the same thing, you know, said, no, you know, I need to distance myself from you.
Do you think he regrets it?
No. I don't think he regrets testifying. I think there was a part where he said, I don't regret anything or regret doing, I don't remember exactly, but I don't think he regrets testifying. I think, like you said, he just never distanced himself from the things that had happened to him and never really found a way to accept and deal with the pain that he's felt. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what separates the two and the life that they have now.
You know, when I first heard about this, I was almost like upset because it's like, to me, you let this man live for I don't know how long and make how much money, and he was never brought to justice. So the fact that this story comes out now I don't feel like it's going to change much. You know, there are those diehard Michael Jackson fans who are always going to listen to his music, and then there are those who are like me who I don't really care. I mean, if a song comes on and I recognize it, maybe I'll sing along with it, but it doesn't damage him anyway. All it does, it seems to be doing, is hurting the kids, and it's like, these kids had no knowledge of this was going on. Like, this happened before Paris was even born.
Well, unfortunately, the time that we live in, news and content moves so fast. This is going to be a story for maybe a month, maybe. But by this time next year, 2 months from now, it's going to be a part of the past already. You know, nobody's going to be thinking about it. Something else is going to come out, unless more victims come out, speak out. You're right. It's not going to do anything. I mean, there has been damage. You know, he's had statues taken down. He's had things removed from museums.
He's dead, though. It doesn't directly affect him like it would if this was a regular Joe on the street who was accused of pedophilia.
Well, I mean, it might affect his estate and things of that nature. But you're right, it's not going to affect anything too hard.
Right.
I think it's affected his family a little bit, and it's affected his kids, because there's a report that Paris Jackson was hospitalized for a possible suicide attempt.
Right, but then she debunked that.
Well, she denied it. We can't ever really know, though.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. This is only hurting the kids who, again, they weren't born at this time when these horrible things were happening. I feel like the moms, the second the first allegations came out, they really should have talked to their sons and been like, is anything going on? Like, that first allegation, they should have immediately separated themselves from Michael.
But they talked about it. They didn't think he could do any harm.
But it doesn't
and the
matter.
And they
it's
did go to the kids.
possibility.
Yes, it is a possibility. And they went to the kids, and they trusted their kids. The kids said no, and they trusted their kids.
Well, of course they're going to trust the kids. But I'm just saying, like, I feel
I mean, what can you do?
They should have pushed a little more.
Maybe so, but again, it's not just some guy. It's Michael Jackson. These kids idolized him.
But it doesn't matter who it is. It's a person who did a horrible thing against a child. I
But
don't care
they
if they're
didn't
Michael
know
Jackson
that.
or not.
They didn't know that.
I know, babe. I'm just saying.
You can't just say you need to separate yourself because he did horrible things. They didn't know that. They asked the kids. Kids emphatically said no, and that was the end of it for them.
I'm saying even when they did deny it, they still should have. That should have been the first reality check and be like, hey, maybe nothing's going on. Maybe something is going on, but I think for the sake of my son.
But that was number
we
one.
Should distance the kids a little bit.
But that was allegation number one.
Come on, allegation number 2. Both of the boys called their parents and was like, no, you're not testifying.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. There was finally another pat on the back of saying, okay, that's the second allegation from another boy around the same age. Maybe we should start taking it serious. So the first one was like, okay, this is one allegation, one boy, our boys say no, let's move on. The second one was like, okay, this is serious, I'm starting to question it. My boys are telling me he's a bad man. That's where we need to separate.
I mean, even when the mom was talking about the first allegation and when they made that settlement, she was like, no money is gonna change the fact that Michael assaulted my son. And so even when she said that, I was thinking about the boy's parents. What was his name?
Wade.
No.
James.
No, the one who accused Michael the first time. Jordy. Jordy's parents, they should not have accepted that settlement. They should have continued on with the process and showed that, yes, this man has done this to my child.
But at the same time, it was probably at the urging of the lawyers because maybe they didn't have the money because probably any sort of wealth that they were getting was coming from Jackson. And Jackson wasn't going to give them money to sue himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was probably at the urging of the lawyers, and there was nobody else to back Jordy's claims. It was Jordy versus Michael Jackson.
I don't know. The whole thing to me just feels like...
And you're right. Of course, no amount of money makes it okay for Jackson to do these things. But what choice did they have?
I mean, I also got to think this was 1990s. It's
yeah.
Not as... Like, if this happened today and Michael was still alive today, it would
have been over and done with before
they even made the docuseries.
Right. So I don't think the family had much of a choice but to accept the money. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it would have put them in the tough spot, but...
As much as you want to fight, even if they did want to fight, like I said, I don't know much about the family, but just sitting here, any sort of wealth that was coming their way was probably coming from Jackson's empire.
I mean, come on. You heard, I believe it was James' family, after the first allegation, his family went to Michael, James' family went to Michael for a loan on a house, and he ended up gifting it. And that, to me, just sounds suspicious. Like, you just got a settlement for a sexual assault allegation, and now you're giving a house to one of your, quote, best friend's family.
Yeah. I mean, after it was explained that he didn't want... It was the Safechucks, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want the Safechucks family to continue paying the loan on the house that Jackson gave them, and he just said, consider it a gift. After it was explained, you know, around the time of this allegation, that's when it became weird. But outright, you know, it wouldn't have rang any bells in my head. But yeah, after the explanation of he just finished with the settlement and now he's gifting us a house. Yeah, that's...
No, I do think, being that it happened, you know, back then, and everyone was just in awe that Michael was talking to them in general, they did, you know, ignore a couple of signs that anyone today would definitely... I feel like anyone today would question within a heartbeat.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that all we have to say?
That's all we got.
Yeah.
We'll continue with the rest of part 2. We have probably an hour left to go.
Yeah, about
in
an
part
hour.
2. We got into a little bit today. I know I said part 1, but we just kind of flowed it all. We'll do that next week along with some other things.
On a little side note, we have not posted the podcast in the past 2 weeks because there's a lot of stress going on in the family. Like, just a lot of stress going on, like, at home right now. But if you do stay up to date with the website, there are some slight changes that I've made, and we are going to be starting a blog on the website about, you know, what it's like for us being 19 and 20, you know, with our families being very different, moving forward in our careers and as a couple, moving to Arizona. So that's, I guess, something new to look for on the website. We'll try and maintain that a lot better than we do the podcast. So, yeah.
All right. Well, like and follow us on all of our social medias, and we'll have another episode next week.
Bye.